Welcome to the Once and Future Authors Podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted to be joined today by author Wendy Beasley. Wendy's book, Beasts and Butterflies. I'll read you a little bit off the back. Raped and pregnant at 13, Rachel is forced by her uncaring adoptive parents to leave the picturesque village where she had grown up. Years later, she's given the opportunity to go back with her son. But can she face old friends, her inner demons, and the rapist? And if so, will it destroy her completely, or can she finally find the love and closure she craves? Beasts and Butterflies by Wendy Beasley. I'm so delighted that Wendy's here to join me today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for asking me. It's lovely to be talking to you.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm always loving speaking with anyone who has that lovely accent of yours. As a New Yorker, I love to hear that that British lilt coming through.
I'll do my best not to disappoint.
Well, I'm not worried about that at all. Now, tell me a little bit before we get into Beasts and Butterflies about you and your writing. When did you get started writing?
Well, it's been a long journey. I've written non-fiction for many years. I've written articles, a weekly column in a national magazine, and two non-fiction books. So I've been writing a while, but I'd never considered fiction. I'd never really gone down that route at all. And then I wrote a story for my granddaughter who was moved and she was frightened of the new house, and I needed to put her at ease. So I wrote her a fairy story. Well, that granddaughter is now 24. And I picked up the book about 2 years ago and thought, I wonder if this could be published. So I sent it off to various publishers, tidied it up and sent it off. And it was accepted, which amazed me. It was accepted for publication, and that was the beginning. So Charlotte and the Fairies came out last July, and I was thrilled to bits. But in the meantime, over nearly as long a period, I've been playing with Beasts and Butterflies. It didn't have a title, but it was a story that was in my head and it was growing. And I was still working in those days full time. So it got shelved a lot and bits and pieces. Anyway, after having Charlotte and the Fairies accepted, I thought, well, let's go with this and see where it goes. I'd finished it. Not quite so easy. Lots of rejections, lots of offers of shared contracts. And in the end, that's the way I went with it, because I had so much faith in it. I really wanted it to get out there. So I went for a shared contract, and it came out last November. But to be fair, I'm thrilled to bits. The reviews have been great. Everybody who's read it has, really enjoyed it. And I know I will get bad reviews and I will get people who aren't so complimentary, but so far they haven't come my way and I'm really enjoying it.
Thrilled. And I'm so glad that you recognize that, yes, you will get bad reviews. It happens. You almost have to go into it knowing that, and good for you. You're kind of prepared. There's a story about Stephen King when he first started writing, and he was up in his garret where he would write. And when the first rejection letter came, he had a nail already there on the beam, and he just stuck it on the nail. He was ready. He was ready for it.
Yes.
And eventually he had so many rejections that instead of the nail, he had to get a larger stake to hold.
I love it. That's
One
really encouraging, isn't it?
Stephen King had a stake in the attic to hold all the rejection letters. So you are in very, very good company. That's Well, congratulations on the first fairy book, and Beasts and Butterflies is quite a book. How did the story appear in your head? Was it inspired by something you had heard or something you knew in real life, or perhaps people you know?
I'd love to be able to come up with a really clever answer, but no, it grew from an idea. And I do tend to write. That's how I write. I get an idea and I run with it. And I often say I have no idea how it's going to end or where it's going to go. And it just develops as I go along. And that's how this worked. And it's it comes to me as what if, and would she do this, and how would that happen? So the original idea was just something that entered my head, and then I just ran with it. I just let it go where it wanted to go, and I had no idea what would happen until it happened. It's like reading, really, only more exciting. Because I don't know how it's going to end either.
I love that image of you, wow, look where this is going.
Yes, that's how it is. And I've written another book, which is at the moment with publishers trying to get a deal on it. And it was the same thing. It's a completely different book, but just as dark and probably just as hard hitting. And I started that without an idea at all. Except that I was going to set it in Brighton, which is where I was born, and I thought, oh, I'll set it there, and I've run with it, and I've now completed it, and it's 70,000 words, and I'm thrilled to bits with it, and I can't wait to get it out there. But I had no idea where it was going when I started.
Wow, a whole lot of listeners right now are so envious. You can sit there with the only idea being the setting in Brighton.
Well, I've never struggled to write. I've never struggled I've been very lucky. I don't get a blank page. I don't sit, but I am guilty of probably writing too much. And I think since Charlotte and the Fairies, I've written 2 more children's books and 1 more adult book, and I'm on another adult book, and we're only talking a year. So I'm probably
lockdown.
Yeah, I'm probably too prolific in that respect, and I'm sure publishers don't want to hear from me that many times. But
there is a word for too prolific. That's
but I am, I'm really enjoying it, and I can have 2 books on the go at once, and I find that quite exciting, because I think, oh, I don't really know what's happening there, so I'll do this one, and it works like that for me.
Now, are there any decisions that you made with much more thoughtfully than letting them evolve? For example, in Beasts and Butterflies, Rachel's name or any of the other names, or any things like, do you think about certain things like that for meaning, or do you just, Rachel? I like that.
Well, I come up with the character
Mm-hmm.
and then try and find a name that suits them.
Okay.
I'm very aware of timing, because Beasts and Butterflies started in the 60s, so we didn't want really modern names, and nor really old-fashioned names. So I thought I knew what Rachel looked like. I knew how she thought. I knew who she was before I named her. Less important characters, I just come up with the name of the time, and that would suit the time. But my main characters are usually names I like myself very much, and also I think suit them. And in my next book, the name's Lydia. I've never known anyone called Lydia, but I love the name, and it suited this character. So I think that's how I get it. And ideas come to me in strange places. I could be walking the dogs. Very often when I first wake in the morning, something comes into my head. In the bath, there's another place. But they enter my head at strange times, and I think, oh yes, that could happen, or maybe that would happen. And sometimes I scrap them and think, no, that doesn't work. But
I do love the way you described getting to know your character first before naming. Kind of like if you met a new person and for whatever reason did not know what their name was, and then getting to know them and then thinking, I bet their name is.
Yeah, it is like that. It's very similar to that. It's very much a case of writing, because Beasts and Butterflies was written in the first person, so I didn't really need a name. I was writing, it was me sort of thing, but I was Rachel. And it suddenly occurred to me, oh, she'll need a name. But I knew Rachel far better than her name, which came afterwards.
Very nice. Now, it's funny you mentioned that, you said you were writing in the first person, so in a sense you were Rachel. All books, fiction, nonfiction, have pieces of the author in there. Is it
Yes.
a lot like you, or what part?
I think what I try and do is do it the other way. I don't make the character like me. I try to be the character. It's a different way of looking at it. So I think of how I want them to be, and then think, if that was me, what would I do? How would I feel? So I'm bringing my own feelings in. I'm bringing my own that side of me, but it's not personal experience, and it's not really me. It's just, what would I do in this situation? So that's how it works, really.
Right, but not inspired by your own personality or someone that you know.
No, although you will find in my books, as you have done in that one, there's always a dog. There's always something going on with a dog, and so that's an awful lot of me, because that's my other passion. So there obviously is a lot of me in there. And the writing in the first person, when I started Beasts and Butterflies, I didn't. I wrote it in the third person, and I wrote of her. Then I changed it. Then I changed it back, and in the end, the only way I could write that was by being Rachel. I could only do it by trying to fill her shoes, and that's why that's written like that.
Interesting that you started it in a different way and then changed.
Yeah, and change it. I often do. I often go back and change. The book I'm writing at the moment, which is really quite new, I'm only sort of 10,000 words into it. I've changed several times, and it's nothing like the original idea. It's branched off quite diversely, but you've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
This is very true. This is very true. And super encouraging. One thing I always like is when authors that I'm speaking with, like yourself, are giving words of, whether they're advice or encouragement, to other writers, and without even meaning to, you're giving a huge check mark of permission right now.
Yes.
Off your pen or off your fingers the very first time, you don't have to stick with that.
No, indeed.
Sometimes I get the feeling that people think, oh, I'm 20,000 words in, I'm not really feeling it anymore, but I guess I have to stick it out. And you're kind of saying no.
Yes, definitely. I think if you ever get to a point when you're stuck, then maybe you shouldn't be at that point. Maybe you've got to go back and see what brought you to the point where you got stuck. And I had a completely different idea of how this current book was going to go than the way it is going. But when I have a new idea, it's really exciting. It really is. And I'm very lucky. I can talk to my husband and say, I've changed this to that. What do you think? And he'll give an opinion. And he is very good. I'll read bits to him, and he said, but would that happen? Or do you think she would do that? And it pulls me up and makes me think, no, you're probably right. So I give him a lot of credit for where I end up.
Well, I'm delighted to hear this. I was speaking with an author a few weeks ago, and I said, has your husband read your books? And she admitted, nope, not a one.
Well, mine doesn't have any choice. I read them to him. I said, because when I read, you hear it yourself, don't you? Much better.
No, it's great to read it out loud.
Reading it quietly. If you read it out loud, you get a better understanding. So whenever he sort of comes in the office, I say, listen to this, and he has no choice. And he'll say, yeah, that's good, or I like that, or do you think that this would happen like that? And that's invaluable. You really need that voice to say, to question.
And I'm so glad you spoke about reading it out loud, even without your incredibly helpful husband there. Just the act of reading it out loud, hearing it back. Uh,
Yes.
well, for one thing, it is the number one way to self-edit because you will clean up your grammar like nobody's business.
Absolutely, and punctuate, because my worst thing, I have to admit, I left school at 15. I had no qualifications. I haven't been to university. I've never had any tuition in writing, and my punctuation is my weak point. And I go through, and when I read it, I think, hang on, I need a breath there. So if you read it out loud, you do that.
Wow, I am so impressed.
Thank you.
Gosh, I had no idea. That's unbelievably impressive. And not only that you are doing all of this writing with, none of the advantages of higher education, but that you also sense when you need to fix something so well.
Yeah, well, I loved English at school, and I was very into writing at school. I'd have gone to school and had English all day if it was
Ah,
down to me. Um, and as I say, because of my hobby of dogs and dog training and working dogs, I got into writing about dogs and produced 2 books on training and working dogs. And so I sort of forced myself to learn how to punctuate and to learn. Well, my grammar's always been okay, but punctuation's been dreadful. And I do have a very, very good friend who is very pedantic. And when I've finished a book, she kindly reads it and adds things like semicolons, which I never even used before, but and she says, I think, you need this. So punctuation wise, I have read it out loud, and I have my friend June who goes through it.
fantastic, fantastic. Good for you to use your friend June, your husband, reading it out loud. You're using all the tools available to you. I can't tell you what an encouragement you are for all of our writer listeners out there. You're doing it. Look at it. Look at all this stuff you're doing. It. You're making it work. I'm a dog lover too, so I'm gonna have to ask you to tell me a little bit about the dogs.
Right. Well, I have border collies. I've had over 50 years of breeding, working, and training border collies. I, without boasting, have been very successful at my sport. I've made champions up working them, and it's been my passion throughout all of my life. And I still breed them, work them, train them. And as I say, that got me into my writing, really, because people actually wanted to hear what I had to say. So it worked. And I don't know, it used to have Dog World in the States. It's quite a well respected, and I wrote a magazine, wrote a column in that every week on working trials.
Oh my.
So as I say, in Charlotte and the Fairies, there was a border collie. And in Beasts and Butterflies, there is a border collie, but I have promised there won't be one in every book.
Right ahead. If you want to have a border collie, I have many authors who have cats in every
Yes.
book. And I was so amazed to find out that here in the States, there is actually a cat writers organization.
Oh.
All of those who write with cats, they were even having a national convention, and they all wear cat ears. And I think
I might draw the line at that.
so. There's no dog writers association over there.
No, apparently not. We're obviously missing a trick.
I don't know if cats are more literary, but
I do find that most people, a lot of authors, when they come onto Instagram and things, they all do seem to have cats. I've got cats, but they're just cats. They're lovely. We love them, but they're just cats. Not like the dogs that I actually have a relationship with.
I know I get that. I have dogs and cats,
Yeah.
and I'm listening to you with your training. I have about the most untrained little dog.
What have you got?
I have a little white Havanese, but
Right. Oh, I know Havanese.
yeah, well, she's the runt of the litter. She's only 5 pounds.
Right, tiny, yes.
Just now she's older. She's 14. So at this point, she doesn't even walk. We just carry her everywhere. Very different working dog.
The book I've got out at the moment, trying to get a literary agent, trying to get a publisher, and I'm shoving it out there to everybody, is called Angel. And you'll be the first person to know that Angel is a little white dog, quite like a Havanese.
Really?
But it's not what the book's about. It's just the title. But
we call our dog's name is Shamrock, but she is our angel. That's for sure.
There you go.
Absolutely is our angel. Well, certainly when that book comes out, you're going to have to join me back here on the show.
Yes.
But I'm amazed you're writing about a little white dog and not another border collie.
Well, there's a reason for that, and it's tied up with the title, so we'll have to wait and see.
They might be beautiful, but they're not angels.
No, I can imagine.
Now, when you start a book like Angels or Beasts and Butterflies, I know Beasts and Butterflies, and the other one you mentioned you said rather dark. Was that a deliberate choice, or is that just?
I think it seems to be what I like to write about. I don't know if that says something about me. I don't intend to write shocking or dark things, but I think most of us have a side that's quite interested in the macabre and the dark, and most Beasts and Butterflies has a murderer or a type of a murder in it, and this next one does as well. And I think it interests me, so I expect it will interest other people. So yes, I think I like it. That's why I write about it. I don't like bland stories that just trickle along. I like a bit of a bite to it.
Yes, well,
and I read books like that. So.
You're so bubbly, and you train dogs. I would never think that. But what do you like to read?
Well, I'm very strange, really. I have quite an eclectic mix. I read a lot of T.J. Green. She's the Whitehaven Witches, and I love the witch stories. But contrary to that, I read the Dr. Ruth Galloway mysteries, Ellie Griffiths, and that's a series. I do quite like series. I do quite like books that I can pick up the second or third, and I know the characters and I know the style. But I've never written a series or even attempted to. But I'm absolutely crazy on Harry Potter, which is a bit of an admission. So I've moved on from wizards to witches, and the Dr. Ruth Galloway is. She's a pathologist, so that could be feeding into my dark side. So quite a mixture.
Yes, absolutely. And who knows, maybe one of your books you'll realize that you got to the end and those characters are.
There's more. Yes, I do think that's a great possibility, that it will come to a point when I think I can do more with this. I try to avoid sort of detective type murders because I don't know enough about how detectives solve crimes, and I think it's nothing worse than an amateur trying to pretend they know, and I don't. So I sort of don't go down that route. And the other thing I'm a little bit, people say remiss in, is that I don't write, as you will have discovered, with long descriptive chapters on the birds and the bees and the sparkling trees. You know, I just, because I skip them when I'm reading. When I read, and there's a great big thing telling me how the moon is sparkling on the water, I skip it, you know, I don't care. And so I'm a little guilty of moving the story along without setting the scene. But I really believe readers should set their own scene. I think if you ask two people who've read a book, they'll have different ideas of what the setting's like, they'll see it from their own point of view. And I think to a certain extent you should leave the reader to fill in the gaps, because that's the pleasure of reading.
I love that. I love
When I was a little girl, my mum used to read. My mum used to read fairy stories to me, naughty books and fairy stories, and and she did all the voices. And she was, a real actress. She did. She just would do all the voices. And rather than show me the pictures, she'd read the book, and the pictures would come into my head. And I think that's powerful. I think let people make their own pictures.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why, in general, and while the Harry Potter movies were just terrific, the books are better. And
Yes,
in general,
yes, because you had your own idea, didn't you?
exactly. I mean, they did a spectacular job,
Yes,
and getting to see, wow, what Hogwarts looks like.
yeah,
But it was actually, when it was in your mind, it was probably even more fantastic.
more magical. Yes,
And
absolutely.
yours. And it was yours. It wasn't
Yes, it
direct.
wasn't anybody else's. No.
Right. But I did find it interesting that you skip writing the parts that you skip reading. And, don't apologize for that. Absolutely don't apologize for that. You should write the book you want to read.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to read it,
Why
you're
would I write it?
not alone out there. I'm sure there are other people who just skip that part too.
I'm very much into the proceedings, what happens next. And I like to keep it exciting and keep you on your edge of your seat and thinking what might happen. And certainly with Angel that I've just finished, I believe people will be white knuckled. But I don't want to break that off by saying what the weather's like. Unless it's relevant, I don't care.
Exactly. No, I think like I said to you earlier, you are giving a whole lot of people a whole lot of permission here. And sometimes, sometimes I think when people suffer from writer's block or such, it's because of a lot of pressure and preconceived notions that people put upon themselves. But Wendy is here to tell you, nope, don't have to do
Write what you like.
Write what you like, read it back out loud. You don't need advanced degrees to be doing this.
No. And I think I should say, though, to qualify all this, I'm not a successful author. This is my first book. And it's not really, unless I can get it out there and promote it and market it, it's probably not going anywhere.
You're a very successful author. And the fact is, they say in polls that 90% of the population wants to write a book.
Yes, I think that's probably true.
And you have several books, you have published, you are sitting here with fabulous reviews on this, you've got 2 more in the docket. Don't you let anyone tell you that you are not a successful.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Not only are you a successful author, but if 90% of the population wants to write a book and only like a 0.5% actually do, you are the person that people say, wow, I want to do that. So
that's great. I hope so. It's really good. I'm very probably not going to be very popular for saying this, but for me, I don't like self-publication. I really need the endorsement of a publisher saying I want to do that, because I feel that you'd never know if it was good enough if you just do it yourself. And I know people do, and they're very successful. I'm not knocking anybody else, but for me, I really want a publisher to say, yes, we'd like your book. And that's the route I chase.
And you're absolutely right. There are different routes. I'm very grateful that there are different routes for people to take, and to each their own.
Yes.
And you giving people permission with that statement of saying, do what works for you.
For you. Yes, very much so.
Pressured to do, I think it's wonderful. I think the writer community is so supportive of each other. And you will hear lots of different options out there, and that's wonderful, but they're not all for you.
No, absolutely. And there's self-publishers out there who are bestsellers and won no end of literary prizes.
Absolutely.
But I think it takes a certain confidence, which perhaps I haven't got. So
after a few more books, you'll have that confidence.
Yeah,
You have to promise me that, well, certainly when the book about the little white dog comes on, you'll have to promise me to join me back here on the show so that our listeners can follow along with your successful writing career.
Thank you, I will.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me. You've been a delight. Just to remind all of our listeners, Wendy Beasley, the author of Beasts and Butterflies, and so much more to come. So please make sure you grab a copy and follow her and see where she takes you next. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.